You're listening to a 58 Ember production.
Girlscamp, it's Girlscamp.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girlscamp podcast. I'm your host, Haley Rawl, and if you are navigating a faith deconstruction too, or simply fascinated by faith deconstruction journeys, by Mormonism specifically and religion generally, then you are in the right place. I am joined today for the second time. First time on the couch, though.
Yes, I'm so excited.
This is Chelsea Homer. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. And I am so excited because you are absolutely killing it. So much has changed since we last recorded together. And I just feel like I'm cheering you on, and we're so lucky to have you in this niche post-Mormon corner of the world. So thanks for having me back.
Thank you. I feel the same about you. I should actually go back and listen to our episode. I have a weird thing. I hate listening to old episodes because it's like reading your journal, you know? But I will link it in the show notes for anyone who wants more on Chelsea's story. In a nutshell, you have, I feel like, pioneered the post-Mormon space in a lot of ways.
Okay,
as it is now.
Yeah.
As it is now. I really do feel like that. Like, I mean, I think there's different like guards, you know? Anyway, you were one of the first people I ever followed on the internet that was talking about faith deconstruction. And you've done such wonderful work in building actual real life community for people in Utah outside of Mormonism and religion generally, and also even broader than Utah because there's digital events as well. That is with the Lost and Found Club. Yes. So I will also link Lost and Found as a resource. I have people asking me all the time, how do I make friends? How do I find people? I always refer them to Lost and Found. You're doing such wonderful work there.
Thank you. That's so nice.
Yeah. Thanks for the work that you do. I know it's not always easy.
No, it's not.
But we are here today to talk about the A24 film, Heretic.
Woo woo, yeah.
Which we have both seen. By the time this episode airs, it will be wide released. And we're actually just talking about this. There will be spoilers today. We're just getting into all of the thoughts and feelings. So if you want to watch it, maybe wait to listen to this episode. But if you don't want to watch it, we'll be providing enough context along the way that I think you'll still be able to capture the gist of what we're talking about. I also wanted to say really quickly that I am doing a full breakdown, quite thorough, step-by-step synopsis of the film Heretic on the Patreon. So I will also link that. So if you are not a scary movie person, but you want to know every single thing that happens, you can go listen to that recap there.
That's great.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been pretty deep into this movie. I had a little break from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Tell them how many times you've watched this movie already.
I watched it for the third time. The time you watched it first, that was my third time. And I'm so glad I've been able to watch it that many times. It's been interesting, kind of my journey watching it that many times, the different things I've taken away on each watch and how setting even affects it. Watching it in a theater was very different. Watching it with my never Mormon friend was very different, which we'll talk about. I can say after a third watch that I really love the movie. What would you say? What is your if someone says, how did you like it? How would you respond?
I really liked it. I'm going to go watch it for the second time this Sunday. So I liked it enough to watch it again. I mean, we are hosting a screening, so I have to be there regardless, but I'm excited about it. First of all, like A24, Mormonism, and horror, like that crossover, I was seeded months before it came out. So I was anticipating the release. That's why when we got a last minute invite to the screening, I literally cried tears. It's so embarrassing because it was just like, this is the trifecta. And then you add Mormon Housewives, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, like just so much of it together.
Why don't you give some context on that? Because that is, yes, a very special way to see this movie for the first time.
So an A24 hosted a screening, and you probably saw it was like the duo Whitney's hosting this. And I Lost and Found got an email like 2 days before the event happened, and they were so generous. They offered us like 40 tickets, which was crazy.
That's
because
super
I didn't
cool.
think we'd even I remember begging on my stories, like, if there's any way to watch this, like someone let me know how. And it was just an open theater where they had the two options, belief or disbelief, like in the movie. And you would choose one of the doors, and that would be the theater that you would watch it in. So Whitney, Levitt, I went to the belief room, and you went to the disbelief theater, right?
Yeah. So
I'm excited to hear how your experience was.
I know. It was Whitney Levitt from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, who is very much a Mormon believer. Yeah. And then Whitney Rose from The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Yeah, it was a genius marketing move. And yeah, really fun to watch amongst people who have either been through something similar or are still connected to Mormonism. I think it made it all interesting. I just realized we haven't given the premise of the movie. I'm assuming people know if you're listening, but in a nutshell, this movie is about two sister missionaries, Mormon missionaries. They get a request to visit this man's house because he wants to learn more about the church, and they unwittingly end up trapped in his home. And he sets up a sort of psychological game to test their belief and to kind of play with almost what a believing mind would do in certain situations. And we'll get into that a lot more. But that's the general premise of the movie. I personally, entering this movie, I thought it was going to be a movie about how missions are unsafe and how sister missionaries don't have proper safety precautions. And I didn't know how it was going to pan out. I knew there was the belief and the disbelief door from the trailer. What I didn't realize was that, what I think at least, is that this movie was an analogy in a lot of ways for a faith deconstruction. That's how I read it. And I didn't know it was going that deep into that territory. Did you have any expectations about what it was going to touch on or be?
I thought it'd be more like a Squid Games Mormon game of like you'd be trying to pass off different games. And it was like, it wasn't quite that. So it was surprising, but I didn't know if it would go too much into Mormonism. I thought it could be clickbaity or anyway. So I know we'll talk about this later, but shocked by how deeply it went into Mormonism, where Hugh, Mr. Reed, is interrogating religion through the vehicle of Mormonism. So Mormonism played a huge role, which was actually a really special treat, in my opinion, where I just was totally shocked that we would be going into the weeds as much as we were in the movie.
I agree. I want to talk about that now because I think a big question a lot of people have, either as Mormons who are deciding if they want to watch it, or as ex-Mormons, or people who are never Mormon who have seen it or are about to see it, is how Mormon is it really? I love the way you just phrased that, because I think there was a lot of Mormonism. And I think that there is a lot to be said about the way that they used Mormonism as the entry point to a discussion about faith deconstruction much more broadly, which we can put a pin in. But the Mormonism stuff, I thought there was a lot of Mormonism, and I found it mostly very accurate. Did you notice anything that you thought was off?
No, and I'll have to go. I mean, I only watched it once, but I would love to watch it again with subtitles because I know there are things that I missed. But when he talked about Fanny Alger, like there was like gasps all over the theater, like, we are no longer in clickbait territory. We are in the meat and potatoes of Mormonism, where he was going through, the drum roll leading up to like polygamy was this big question he was posing to these two sisters sitting across from him in his living room. And like any woman who's raised in the church knows, like that is like the Achilles heel of deconstruction, where, and Fanny Alger, for those who aren't familiar, she was the supposed secret first wife of Joseph Smith. She was hired help in the Smith home. And it's rumored that Emma caught Fanny, who is estimated to be about 16 years old, we can't leave that part out, with Joseph in the barn in the act. And Oliver Cowdery has called it like the secret dirty affair. Like this is a scarlet letter name in Mormonism. So for him to be going in depth, our rom-com king, like I've never seen Hugh in such a nasty depiction, but he was like going into the depths of polygamy, and I could even hear people like nodding or sighing in agreement. Like he is the clear villain, but the points he was making, it's like, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. It's such a weird, it's like the little shoulder angels, where it's like in this deconstruction, you hear Hugh's voice, and then the sisters, their responses like were so genuine. Like I remember thinking, one of the Sister Barnes says something like, oh, it's about the numbers. Like they just needed to have more children. And even Sister Paxton of like, just like sighing and like, I don't know, I don't understand it, but we just believe it's revelation. Like, that's such a Mormon response. And I remember responding both of those ways to being confronted with this information. To have that conversation in the living room, like that was so surreal, to be watching with a bunch of post-Mormons in this horror film that none of us had any idea what to expect.
Yes, I was so compelled by that first, they come into the living room, and pretty quickly, Mr. Reed, who is Hugh Grant, shows that he knows a lot about Mormonism. And he kind of sets up this situation of, he said, I wanted to figure out what the one true religion is, and you can tell he knows his shit. And he starts talking about Mormonism, and he knows a lot about it. And then he introduces this question of polygamy, and he seems to be asking the sisters in somewhat good faith, what do you make of this polygamy thing? Do you even know? And what I loved about that moment was the way that this film captured the horror and the terror of being a devout Mormon and learning that story that you just told about Fanny Alger. But you have this actual terror of, this guy seems creepy. I can sense something's going to happen. There's suspense building. He says his wife's there, but his wife hasn't shown face. You're feeling afraid because it's a scary situation that these innocent, kind of naive sister missionaries are in. But then there's this psychological fear that we know very well of starting to learn these things, and it's really scary.
Yeah, that's a great dichotomy, the two of them, like two different fears and threats. Did that happen for you? Like, I didn't serve a mission, but did you ever get confronted with people who'd done a lot of research and were in it to just interrogate you?
Yes, I actually didn't have that. And for anyone who doesn't know, I did serve a mission in Berlin, Germany. So I feel like there was a lot that I related to in a lot of ways. Obviously, they didn't get so much into the mission. I thought they got a lot into Mormonism, honestly, not much into mission culture or anything like that. I definitely related to the mission stuff that they did show. I feel like in Germany, people just didn't know what it just didn't even matter enough to them. Like, they hadn't even heard of it.
Wasn't even on their radar.
No, but I actually did watch this movie with a friend of ours, and he served a mission in California, and he was freaking out during that scene because he, on his mission, sat down with someone that said, do you know XYZ about Joseph Smith? Do you know about the polygamy? Do you know about the rock in the hat? And he was as devout as they come, full-blown missionary. That was his first exposure to this information. He then went to the library on his one day off and started researching this stuff. So it was very true to his experience, and he was so shaken up, as you can imagine, because he had all that information also presented to him in his most devout, believing state as a Mormon missionary. So I would be curious how many people have experienced that, because I believe that probably a lot of people that have served missions have had those sort of encounters.
Yeah. I know people are asking me, like, would it be triggering as a missionary? And I don't know, because I don't have those experiences. But I think just the inherent lack of safety and your vulnerability, like, these two sisters had no defense or anything. And they were so polite, like, to a comical degree of, like, thanking Mr. Reed throughout the entire exchange, which was so, like, not consensual, very aggressive. Anyway, so I could see that being really hard to watch back if you had that real life experience.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good point too. The sister missionaries, I think, were so phenomenal. The portrayals. Interestingly, both Chloe East and Sophie Thatcher, I believe, who played the sister missionaries, are both ex-Mormon. As far as I tried to fact check this, Sophie has talked about it in an interview. I believe she left the church when she was quite young. She's also a twin. Did you know that?
Really? No,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's a twin, because Chelsea's a twin, and I have twins.
Twins.
Yeah, she's a twin, and she talked about growing up as a twin.
Oh, I've got to read that.
Yes, you should read it. I'll link it. But she talked about growing up as a twin and as a Mormon in Chicago. And she was like, I just felt very different.
Yes. Yeah. I did read something about Chloe that she might be Mormon adjacent. Like, she grew up around a lot of Mormons.
Okay, but is not ex-Mormon herself.
I don't know. Yeah. We might want to fact check that. But I read an article too about how she was, like, texting her friends who served missions. Like, is this accurate?
Yes.
How should I be acting in this situation? Which I thought was, like, she did a really, really great job.
I thought she did a great job too. And that's the only thing I could find on her too. So I'm not sure if she did grow up Mormon, but it seems like she's quite connected to at least a handful of Mormons.
You can tell for both of them. I think, they just played the part.
They played the part really well. Sister Barnes, who's played by Sophie Thatcher, she almost to me represented like a step of not even deconstruction, but she almost represented more progressive Mormonism in certain instances. And then you have Sister Paxton, played by Chloe East, who is just although it does complicate further into the movie as her story develops, but at the beginning at least just seems like the most naive, the most accommodating, people-pleasing, eager, earnest,
robotic almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sister missionary.
Which I know that my theater, we were kind of talking about how Sister Barnes, in the highest compliment, embodied the convert vibes, where she still had some of herself attached. Like she still felt a little bit embodied. She felt like she was able to question authority, talk back to Mr. Reed, which I wouldn't say are super Mormon traits for Mormon women, you know? So like, I do feel like she kind of leaned into that convert story. And that she did seem a little bit more assertive and
and
empowered.
There were moments throughout as the story progressed where you could tell she had thought about these things before. It was interesting because I feel like I related watching to Sister Paxton as a Provo-born Mormon girl who served a mission, didn't know any of this until pretty deep into my deconstruction. But I also related to Sister Barnes when I was more starting to deconstruct, when I was still making excuses and justifications, but believed enough. And I also really liked that. I liked that they had such different personalities, because seeing how they each reacted, I think, was really cool to watch.
Yeah.
They're in the living room with Mr. Reed. They end up being pulled back further into the house. And one of the themes that I thought was so impactful for me was this theme of the only way out is through. Mr. Reed locks them in the home and the front door won't open, and they're now deeper into the home, and he has the belief and the disbelief door. And he says, "You are welcome to leave my home at any time. You just have to go out the back. You have to go through. You can't go back where you came from." And that felt so true to a faith deconstruction experience as I experienced it, which is you start getting this information about Mormonism, you start questioning things, and then you kind of are faced with this lose-lose scenario of it's seeming like everything I've ever known is probably not true, but what's the alternative? And now I can't just turn around and be the person I was before I knew all of this. And I feel like that choose your door, you have to go through this, you can't turn around and unsee all of this, was really wild to watch play out on screen, because it felt like what my faith deconstruction was like. Did you feel that same resonance with your faith deconstruction journey?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to like unsee, unread, unlearn things that you're being exposed to. And I found it like I deconstructed in a mixed faith home. And so obviously I wasn't held captive, but like I was confronted with information where my husband left years before I did, confronted with information that I wouldn't have naturally sought out initially. And so it's kind of like, oh, I'm being exposed to this. This is really, it is like traumatic of just trying to figure out where do I stand and being exposed to things that I don't think I was ready. I don't know if you're ever ready to completely implode your life, but yeah, I think that you just have to keep going deeper and deeper. And it's very hard to maintain a status quo once you start to learn things. And that's why I can see why the church would villainize these exchanges with post-Mormons, because in some ways it is kind of contagious, where you start to learn and explore. And it's like the momentum is going one way and you have to just keep going.
Yeah.
And then it gets too painful that it's like in stopping, it's painful to stop. Like it's just like
yes,
a moving train that has a destination.
Yes. Oh, that's so true, because I've been thinking of it as a trap, which I think the movie played on. They're trapped inside the house. He's like kind of giving them this illusion of choice, right?
Yeah.
Like you can leave at any
time. There
time.
was never an exit.
There was never an exit, because even the doors didn't lead to an exit. But yes, I think that's a great point of feeling like once you are on the train of deconstruction, which many of us, I don't think, it's not like we hop on it.
Right.
There's a lot of factors that kind of get you started on that journey. It does feel like as these sisters in the movie, they kind of get forced deeper into this
like
house.
Your friend on his mission.
Yes.
Like just situations, you're confronted with things. If you're interacting in the world and online too, like TikTok, I'm seeing a lot of people being exposed to information that they just had no access to before.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not it's popping up in their algorithm. You know, they're not necessarily seeking it out, to your point. I think that's happening more and more. And I just think a horror movie and the suspense and the psychological thrillerness of it all felt so fitting when thinking about what it feels like to deconstruct the faith of your upbringing.
Yeah.
It just was like, oh yeah, this is it. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the elaborate analogy when Mr. Reed pulls them further into the home and he kind of gives his spiel against all organized religion. So they start out in the living room. There's some poking about Mormonism. We are learning things about the characters. But then that section of the movie is essentially just this whole spiel about how all religion is false, according to Mr. Reed. And he has that analogy with the Monopoly boards, where he says Judaism was this original board game that then got turned into Monopoly, which is Christianity, the most popular version. And then Mormonism is the zany regional spinoff with the Bob Ross Monopoly. I bet that got a good laugh in the theater. And he was just, in many ways, showing that, according to him, religion is stories that have been told since the beginning of time and kind of tweaked and changed and then ultimately repackaged. And now, again, according to him, which I think was resonant for me, he sees a lot of religion as kind of these businesses, these organizations. The ones that do the best are the ones that recruit, and just kind of demystifies the whole of organized religion. I'm curious what that was like for you personally to watch that part of the movie. And then also if you have any insight into watching that amongst people. I know you weren't sitting next to people who believed, but if there was any sense or reaction in the theater you were in as believing Mormons were watching that play out as well.
Yeah, that definitely was like, I was on the edge of my seat, like totally captivated. And I remember in my deconstruction journey learning how Mormonism is basically in its infancy, like compared to other religions. And he obviously made a mockery of that with the Monopoly and then saying that Mormonism is the Bob Ross Monopoly board game of all of these like legit board games. And I can't speak to other religions, but like I think the line of like humility that I felt, it's flirting so aggressively with like embarrassment and shame, which is like, I put all of my eggs in that Bob Ross Monopoly board game. Like, I think just seeing it displayed like that, of course, yeah, we talked about using Mormon as a vehicle. Like, it's an easy religion to pick apart. But it's also hard when it's like, I believed and I gave my entire life to this. I was so believing. So just seeing that visual, I think it was kind of gutting. I know he also kind of talked into like Christianity as a whole, deconstructing like the different stories of Christ and where they've appeared. It just is, the most off-putting part of it is just like this man-splaining. Like this was, many of like Mormonism was created by men. So him, just the visual of him intellectually interrogating these women as he's perpetuating the same like abuse and oppression and control at, you know, like that just felt really icky. But the Monopoly board games, I think people were like laughing once the Bob Ross thing came out.
Yeah.
Like we are the butt of the joke. We've always been the butt of the joke. Even when we were believing, we knew we were the butt of the joke. But I think being on the outside, it like hits differently when it's like, I believed it. Like I really wanted that to be true.
Yeah. Oh, that is so interesting. I had such a different read on it. I'm so glad to hear, because I didn't think about, for me, it almost felt like, okay, this isn't just about Mormonism. Mm-hmm. Like Mormonism is almost on the same playing field now as just like,
true,
but both are true. So it's interesting to see that, because I almost felt at that moment like, okay, we're using Mormonism as kind of the easiest, to your point, like the easiest thing to kind of take apart.
The lowest hanging fruit.
Exactly. And to joke about. Yeah. But also when it expanded into deconstruction of Christianity and organized religion ultimately as a whole, not that it was a relief necessarily, but I almost thought like, okay, I as an ex-Mormon am just like a lot of other people, like a lot of people,
really
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to lean in, where I'm just like, I am stupid. Where I'm not saying anyone who believes, I just like, I was caught in this game and I didn't even think about, and I think growing up too, you don't even learn about other religions. Like we are so kept like to ourselves.
Yeah.
That it's like we would have no idea about iterations because we just don't learn about
Yeah, we
other
just
people.
don't know.
Yeah.
But to me, it almost seems like Mormonism, though quirky and zany and regional, as
Yes.
Mr. Reed would put it,
Yeah.
is kind of more of the same.
Yeah,
It still
yes.
is just this same pattern
Pulling
playing
on the
out.
same threads.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to me, that was almost just a really interesting thing, especially because my faith deconstruction did lead me to deconstruct Christianity, did lead me to deconstruct God. It so mirrored that experience of you learn something about Mormonism and you take that apart. And then as you continue to apply that level of thinking to the greater systems that be and the beliefs that be,
Yeah.
a lot of it for me, and this is absolutely not the case for everybody. I would be really interested to talk to someone who is still a strong Christian believer, but left Mormonism. It would just be so interesting. This is why I think the film is so rich, especially this first part. So much of it is just spoken, not really shown. But I also didn't think about, and I'm so glad you brought that to my attention, that power dynamic. Because I almost viewed Mr. Reed in that scenario when he's kind of tearing it all apart to these sisters, I almost viewed him as a representation of nihilism.
Yeah.
And as like almost a symbol of how terrifying.
And that's how he's selling himself.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
As like, okay, this is them trying to capture how terrifying the feeling of nihilism is. But to your point, in the actual real world that's happening, he is doing the same thing. He's forcing women to listen to him.
Yes.
And then not only that, but then literally kind of forcing them to believe him and trapping them. That didn't even ring for me, but you're so absolutely
and
right.
I just kept thinking, what if they were elders? Like, he obviously wouldn't have used the polygamy thing. Like, I'm thinking, would it be the Book of Abraham? Would it be like the burning the printing press? Like, polygamy, like it was so uniquely like stacked against the sisters, where I just, the power dynamic would be slightly different. Even like men having the priesthood, like what I view as like a pretend power. They at least had an idea that they could do something, like cast like arms to the square something. Sisters are like, I can pray. Like there's like, I don't know. Just the power dynamic. It was so hard to really get into the power of nihilism, which I have deconstructed Christianity. I am so angry at God, and I've lost, I think I've just been burned so substantially by Mormonism that I'm not spiritually curious anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think I also have my biases where like at the end, I know we can talk about, I'm interested to see how like after the third watch, like the first watch, I was kind of hoping for more at the end.
Yes.
I was just wanting a little bit more rage because I was seeing red for years and years.
Yes.
And it was more of like Sister Paxton leaning into the surrender prematurely, in my opinion. But I'm open to it being like,
okay,
different.
Interesting. I very much disliked the ending on the first watch.
Okay.
To the point where we had paused. So the sisters then, we'll go to this point. They then choose the belief door. I actually want to linger here for a second because I did really like this moment. Sister Paxton hears out Mr. Reed and she's kind of like, thank you for teaching us.
I laughed so hard.
We obviously have a lot to learn. That's what she says. We obviously have a lot to learn.
Yeah,
Thanks for
so
allowing us in your
humble.
home. We're going to take the disbelief door and we're going to go home now.
Yeah.
And then Sister Barnes has what I think is a really powerful moment. And what I think for anyone listening who, they're probably not listening to Girlscamp, but I know there's some people, like I've talked to active Mormons in my life.
Yeah.
I do think it's a nuanced approach to religion because Sister Barnes then has this moment where she says, you didn't even account for the Holocaust in your dumb analogy. She says something like, I find your logic flimsy. You were pointing out that this one Egyptian god was similar to Jesus, but you forgot to mention he has a freaking bird head. Yeah. And I really liked that because it is more complicated, obviously, than Mr. Reed laid it out, but it is more complicated. And even as someone who has really deconstructed all the way to the God level, I still find it complicated. Like if I were faced in that same situation right now with a door of belief and disbelief, like I don't know if I would confidently just be like, peace out, disbelief. Like there's so much wrapped up into it and with the spirituality of it and all of the things. And I like how she said that. And she also said, I need to read it because I wrote it down, but I really liked this quote from Sister Barnes where she said, I don't think that my point of view fits into belief or disbelief. I think there's an entire spectrum that your game is neglecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we then descend down the stairs, there's a lot of kind of playing with that idea of not even what is belief and what's worthy of believing in, but how I think almost inevitably everybody falls somewhere on a spectrum of belief. And I mean, yes, we do, right? Some people on the extremes, but more of us maybe than we think somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. Yeah. And I think it also was an important pushback to here's these naive sister missionaries who are trying to defend polygamy with these very flimsy justifications. And it was a moment to see Sister Barnes really has thought about this. Mm-hmm. And she did choose Mormonism. And under, yes, definitely, I think Mormonism is all a lie. I think it's deceitful, etc. But I liked that they were allowing more space for that. I don't feel like the sisters were as much a caricature as I imagined they would be. And I think that would have done those two main characters such an immense disservice. So I really liked the exploration of the spectrum of faith. To your point, as soon as the prophet walks out, which we'll talk about, I literally was like, pause it, because we were watching it here, and I was like, why? I seriously was like, no. Like, this is not, it was so unexpected for me. Yeah. It felt so, I feel like the first part of the movie, which I do still feel in some ways, though I think watching the ending 3 times, I've kind of come around on this.
Yeah.
And my Never Mormon friend had some interesting thoughts on this as well. I feel like they built up so much. It was so smart. It was so tight. And then I think that once they went down the stairs, so much of that suspense dissipated.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I don't know if I still think that there was more that could have paid off from how much they built up at the beginning. That was my qualms with the ending.
Yeah.
It sounds like yours were different, though. Talk to me more about...
Well, I guess, did you want to explore the blueberry stuff?
Yes,
first
let's do the blueberry stuff
going
while we're
down
here.
The stairs.
Yes. Why don't you recap the prophet?
Well, again, he's using women to make his point. So again, I'm like, of course, right? Very creepy, and like all horror films end with women in basements, you know?
In cages.
Like, yeah, I had a lot of thoughts about that. But so this older prophetess, I can just hear the crackling of her body. You know, she's like moving down, like she's shuffling over to them. It's very creepy. It's now reaching out of like the theological horror, and like it's actually just visually scary.
Yes.
And so she has this like blueberry pie on the table, and he's explaining to these sisters like over a vent, just saying that he has poisoned this pie and she's going to eat it and you're going to witness a miracle. And so the woman takes a huge just bite of the pie, and then sure enough, she dies. Again, her like face flops in the pie. Like you knew it was coming, but it was still scary.
Yeah.
And so he was just waiting for these sisters, like the suspense of like, wait for the miracle. And then the doorbell rings. And then there was this distraction, and I don't know what role he was. He's not a mission leader.
He was just supposed to be a mission president. That was one thing they got kind of wrong, I think.
Yeah.
I think he was supposed to be a mission president, but he didn't.
He was just like cleaning the church floor and like looking and seeing that the sisters have not checked back in, and so they're out. And so he went to go look for them, and he arrived on Mr. Reed's door. I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, basically he's just like, did the sisters come by? And Mr. Reed hid their bikes, and he's like, nope. And he's like, okay, see ya. And then he returns just a moment later, while meanwhile we're seeing the sisters trying to, figure out a way out because they're down in that dungeon while Mr. Reed is distracted. And he comes back and he's like, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, did you get this pamphlet? And it's the freaking Restoration Missionary pamphlet. I feel like all that went to show is how incompetent he was as a leader, and how little safety precautions there were.
Tunnel vision. It's like we're trying to recruit, we're trying to convert.
Yep. But
in the meantime, once the sisters go back down the stairs, because they were up at the door like fiddling with the crack, just trying to escape. The prophetess rises and she's like standing behind Sister Paxton.
That's the worst jump scare.
Because
you see Sister Paxton and then it pans and you see that the prophet is no longer sitting there. So you know, like, oh, fuck. And then it pans and she's right behind Sister Paxton.
You can see her hood, right? Yeah.
She's so creepy.
So creepy. And then she says a script, and maybe you can remember because you've watched it 3 times, but she goes off script, but she says something at the very end that says...
She says, this is not real.
This is not real.
So she gives this kind of very simple, like, I saw white clouds, not heaven. My brain was unplugged. This is not real. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously it was a shock for the sisters. So they were processing, like, how did we saw her eat the pie. It was said to be poison. I'm like, couldn't he just say it was poison and not poison it? Like, why did we have to go to such extreme?
Well, he had them check her pulse. He needed them to know. I think he like really needed them to know she was dead because they had to walk over.
Had to, like, lift her face and I forgot about that.
Yeah, so I think he really wanted them to think she was dead and then came back to life. Yeah. And then, from there, you see both of them trying to make sense of what did we just see? And he's playing it as, because Mr. Reed comes down and is like, this is the prophet. We're going to write down her stuff in the scripture, whatever. Now I need you sisters to confirm as witnesses of what you just saw. And Sister Paxton kind of concedes, I don't know what else could have happened. She came back to life. But Sister Barnes pushes back and claims, based on Sister Barnes' own experience, that it was not a miracle, but it was a magic trick or an illusion, and that Mr. Reed had basically just created a near-death experience for this woman. I think the miracle versus magic trick thing was really interesting because that kind of came up with the blueberry pie. He said his wife was in the home making a blueberry pie. That's how he got them to come inside, and he actually had a blueberry pie scented candle. Yeah. So that this prophet situation kind of felt like the continuation of that thread.
The smoke and mirrors.
Yes, of how much can you trick people?
Yeah.
And
I have to say one of the most chilling lines of the whole film for me was when he said, "Do you really believe I have a wife in the next room?" Do you remember he said that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, because then he's like saying, you can't believe everything people tell you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, we all knew she wasn't, but for him to just like vocalize like outright, like that was so chilling.
And to know that the sisters sensed that she wasn't there, but we're still that was actually very chilling as someone who has deconstructed God, because it felt like when you're just trying to convince yourself like, well maybe, and then you kind of hit a moment where you're just like, but no, and that felt like that with the wife.
Resignation, like an acceptance.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes, that was so chilling. And I feel like this prophet thing was really kind of trying to deepen that. Like kind of now as I see the movie, which I didn't on a first watch as much, but I feel like it was just descending deeper and pushing more and more, where at first he's kind of testing their faith. Oh, have you heard about polygamy? Then he's testing their faith. Choose which door you want to go down, laying it bare. But then in like a very tangible sense, he's like, well, let me actually show you a miracle and see what a believing, devout Mormon brain would make of this, which is so diabolical and creepy. And Sister Barnes says, no, I don't believe it. And then he kills her when she said she didn't believe it. I'm curious what you made of that. Why do you think he killed Sister Barnes?
Well, I think he probably overheard their plans of the secret word, which was like garments or something.
Yeah, magic underwear.
Magic underwear.
Yeah.
And so she gave a envelope opener, was it?
I think so.
To Sister Paxton that they found in the library up top. And she said, he won't suspect it coming from you, which I thought was really interesting because like they both knew like Sister Paxton was a little bit more indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And so anyway, she said that, and then he slit her throat right after that. So I think it was also just like challenging of like, I'm going to keep one of you hostage. I know I could probably do more with the more indoctrinated sister was kind of how I took it at face value. But I mean, I'm sure.
No, that makes sense because I think the magic underwear
like
thing.
She was too much of a threat.
Yes. And when she said magic underwear, he knew she was basically telling Sister Paxton to kill him now. So he's like, she's too...
And the neck thing, because she said stab him in the neck.
Yeah.
And so he got her in the neck. So that's why I was thinking it was like a you don't have it on me. I'm just going to kill you right now.
Yes.
But I thought maybe, is he doing another magic trick? Like I was like, in this, like, she can't really be dead.
Yes.
You know?
Well, yeah, which does come back around.
Yeah.
This to me is where I feel like the movie just bit off such gigantic concepts that I almost feel like any ending would have left me a bit unsatisfied, because how do you end when you're talking about like these gigantic meaning of life and death type of things? This moment was interesting because he claims to Sister Paxton that Sister Barnes will come back alive, and then she doesn't. And so then he fishes out of her arm her birth control implant, which he had seen earlier, and tries to tell Sister Paxton, oh, she was actually just an NPC. She actually isn't going to come back alive because I knew this all along. She was an NPC. This felt a little bit flimsier to me because the way that Sister Paxton ultimately saw through all of this was she was like, no, that's actually birth control. She had kind of hyped herself up to do what Sister Barnes had said, like, we can't physically challenge him, but we can intellectually. So I think she's realizing, like, I have to push back against this guy. And he's trying to convince her of, like, a sim theory situation. Very weird. And then it's at that moment that Sister Paxton starts to kind of be like, no, I don't think that that woman actually came back to life, because he's trying to get Sister Paxton to kill herself. Yeah. I also was unsure. Do you think he wanted Sister Paxton to actually just kill herself, or do you think he wanted her to push further into the experiment?
I think he wanted her to push further. I think he wanted her caged, like the other women.
So he had intentionally.
Yeah. And it was hard. That's one part. I'm like, if I were at home watching this, I'd go back and rewatch that dialogue, because there was so much happening in the confusion with the birth control. I'm like, what in the world? Like, is he in control of the situation? And she clearly was calling his bluff, and she put on her Sherlock Holmes hat and was like, actually, there's a door. Like, there has to be another exit. Like, another woman switched places because her head was in a different place on the
when I came down the stairs.
So she was putting the pieces together, and sure enough, she opens the trapdoor underneath the table, and there's a dead prophetess at the bottom. And I thought there'd be hundreds, because I'm like, all horror films end with women in the basement.
Yeah.
Just wait 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, she's right. And and again, you're right, just get deeper and deeper. And it's like scarier and grosser as she's going down. And then she ends up in the room with, it looks like a freezer, basically, with a bunch of women in cages. And she's trying to immediately comfort, like, take off her coat, like, just
take care of them.
Nurturing, yeah. And then he shows up, and I don't know if you want to explain. I know the
final, I mean, not the final moment, but then down by the cages, he says to her, so what is the one true religion? The question that he introduced at the beginning. And she says, I'm not standing here because I want to be here. I'm standing here because this is where you want me to be. And the one true religion is control. And he's like, yep, you got it. It's about control. That's why I keep these women here cold and hungry, because I can control them. And he claims, I didn't trap them here. They made the decision
force her
to be
eat
here.
The poison blueberry pie.
Exactly.
He just starved her enough that that's what she decided to do.
He made an interesting Mormonism, not callback, but point here, where he said, why do you think the Mormon church goes to Haiti? I think he says after an earthquake, and hands out Book of Mormons in the wake of an earthquake in Haiti. And he said, because it's easier to get people to believe and do what you want them to do when they're at their most vulnerable.
When their needs aren't being met.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, using Mormonism in that moment, I think a similar argument could be made for many religions. The religion is control thing, to me. Okay, on the first two watches, I was like, yeah, no shit. Like, is that really, that was kind of my feeling, was that's his final blow is the one, like, it felt so obvious to me. And it felt like even people, I don't know, it fell a little flat in that way. I think watching it the third time and talking to my friend about it, I feel like the point of that was not necessarily revealing to the audience the one true religion is control. Like, many of us kind of know that or have experienced that. I feel like it was more showing the depths, the terrible things this one man would do in order to have control. And so that was more the final point, was like, yes, religion is about control, but now this man is just this gross, awful, terrible man, and he's doing all those things in the name of control as well, almost exposing, I guess, like how horrific that need for control is.
And to feed that.
Yes. How did that ring for you, that moment in the basement?
I thought it was pretty powerful, like that part. And I guess I didn't know where it was going to go afterwards. And so I'm like, it's building. We have this like where it should be climaxing. And so that dialogue, I'm like, yeah, that is powerful, because I felt that control. Like it was just like another reminder of like, yes, that's what it was. Like naming that wound. But I guess for me, after that, Sister Paxton surprises him and stabs him in the throat.
Yeah, with the magic underwear word again.
Yes. So I thought that was kind of like witty little playback. So she runs, and this is the horror film where it's like, where is she going to go? How is she going to escape? Everything's on a timer, like the locks
she
the
can't
doors.
Get out.
She can't get out. I have no idea how she ends back up in the dungeon where Sister Barnes is, but she does, and she gets stabbed in the stomach. I guess for me, I was wanting more rage. And I don't know, I think this is a projection where I still, like, it's been years, and I still have this simmering rage of just like, I wanted her to fight back to him in a really almost manic, like, I guess I just watched the movie The Substance. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
It's so over the top extreme. And so I was kind of wanting it to be like that. Like her just
like a female rage
out of
catharsis.
This cage.
Yeah.
And it didn't, but I'm sitting with it, because I do think the nuance adds a really beautiful layer that I wasn't prepared for. But I will say, for me, like I think the highlight of the film for me was when Sister Paxton was laying on the ground, bleeding out. She's muttering a prayer. She gives this dialogue talking about how it's kind of like a placebo thing, you know,
the
like
great
the
prayer experiment. Yeah.
And I would love to go look into that.
Me too.
More, 'cause I didn't know that before.
Basically, she just says they've done an experiment where there's two groups of patients, like terminally ill, I'm assuming. And they separated them by who was being prayed for and who was not. And there was no difference in outcome.
Yeah. But then she's like, isn't it a beautiful sentiment that someone is praying for you? Like this kind of reclaiming what these men have packaged into what it should be or look like. So she's laying bleeding out and muttering a prayer underneath her breath. And then somehow he shuffles his way, almost decapitated, over to her, like a knife against her throat. And for me, like, getting out of Mormonism, it wasn't praying, it wasn't scriptures, it wasn't like any of the Mormon rituals. It was like the Sister Barneses, who takes this fucking plywood board with 3 rusty nails and just smacks the patriarchy, the machine of Mormonism, Hugh Grant over the head and kills him. And that's what sets Sister Paxton free. And I'm like, that's for me, like, I had such a codependent relationship with God. In some ways, Hugh kind of was like God to me, like, this is Mormon God.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that God would always save me. And then now I'm realizing, like, it's actually my friends who were just as delusioned and in this mind control situation as I was. Like, it was them that helped, like, set me free. And so that beautiful pairing of the two sisters, Sister Barnes just smacking him over the head, and she came back to life. Like, that again is a miracle. I have no idea. Like, we thought she was dead like 30 minutes ago. Yeah. Anyway, just like that friendship for me was like, that's how I got out, and that's how Sister Paxton got out. And so, like, I was like really emotional. Like, that was true for me. And I'm like, I'm gonna give all of my friends blueberry candles for Christmas, and with like a little sign like, you are my miracle, or something, you know, just like, it's just
I love that.
Beautiful thing of. And I think the sad part is, you know, Sister Barnes not making it out, and just thinking like the harrowing fact that like not everybody does. Yeah. Is just so sad.
It is so sad. I really love that emphasis, because I think this sisterhood between Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, though we didn't have much time to establish it, interestingly, it ties back to the magic underwear thing, where at the very beginning, we only get a small glimpse into missionary life, and Sister Paxton, they see some girls on the street and they're like, can we take a picture with you? Is it true you wear magic underwear? And they pull down Sister Paxton's skirt, and it's so embarrassing. That was really hard to watch as someone who served a mission, because it really feels like a humiliation. Like,
yeah, I haven't put that together. It's like they're using that shame as a weapon to get out, like the magic underwear just popping up throughout.
Ooh, yeah.
Like, I didn't put that together from the very beginning.
Yeah, I want to hear you go down that thought process more, because I almost wished that the magic underwear thread was actually connected back to the polygamy thing.
Oh,
just because I feel like there was
yeah.
more there, and that feels just so much more
Of a wound.
Yes, and I think the garment thing, I actually wish that in the original conversation, garments were spoken about as a means of control. And then I think the magic underwear payoff would have felt...
Instead of like the pornography conversation they had at the bench at the very beginning.
Actually, instead of or in tandem with the polygamy conversation in the living room.
Okay.
Because I wish that it had been more established. But no, actually... You're right. It would have been better than the pornography conversation, because it didn't really have to do ever with Mr. Reed. It had to do with the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think that right before she stabs Mr. Reed, he says they control you down to what you wear beneath your clothes.
Yes,
and that's when she said, you mean the magic underwear, and then stabs the motherfucker. Yeah. And I feel like that to me could have been tied back to in a more powerful way, because there's obviously so much there with garments. Some of the qualms that I had when I talked to my never Mormon friend were interesting, because I think I got so caught up, understandably, in the Mormonism of it all that it was just, it's so close to home that it's like, it's just so tender and so close to home.
And that's why I think maybe I'm projecting with the ending. Like, I actually did, like, with the butterfly at the very end, you know, Sister Paxton made a comment earlier, you know, in the night saying, like, to see a butterfly, like, that's how she'd want to come back. Yeah. And so she saw a butterfly, but then she didn't, like, it vanished. So it's just kind of leaving this up to the viewer. Yeah. How you interpret that.
Yeah. And I think it is interpretable. Did Sister Paxton imagine Sister Barnes, or did Sister Barnes come back to life, or was Sister Barnes just never dead? Yeah. I think that was a really interesting open to interpretation of, like, maybe it was a quote miracle at the end that Sister Barnes did come alive and was able to do that, which introduces, especially on top of your reading of it, introduces something really interesting and complicated of, like, you know, as ex-Mormons, I don't believe in miracles of a supernatural sense, but I do believe it's miraculous that I'm surrounded by the women I'm surrounded by. And you know what I mean? Like, even just playing with that word. I think that, interestingly, that final moment where she's praying and she says the great prayer experiment, she basically says, I know this doesn't work. That's not really why I do it, which also was kind of a jump for her character, by the way. If I had learned about the great prayer experiment when I was Mormon, that would have ruined my life. Like, I wouldn't have been able to make sense of that. So that seemed like kind of an odd thing for her to pull out of nowhere. However, I actually found myself walking away from the movie. It almost gave me so much, maybe more compassion for my former self who stayed in Mormonism for as long as I did. Yeah. And understanding that the inclinations for a lot of people, which is even hard for me to say because immediately popping up in my head, very validly so, is like, you're still supporting racism, you're still supporting misogyny, you're still supporting homophobia. But understanding for some people, like, how simple it can be and how unfortunate it is that that simplicity of it's beautiful to pray for someone else, to your point, has been couched in so much patriarchy, racism, homophobia, and it was never meant to be that way. And you kind of see at the very heart of Sister Paxton's devout Mormonism is really just this beautiful sentiment that she finds hope. Yeah. And that's it. And that's really lovely. And I was actually really jealous. Like, I almost wished it triggered me more so in the sense of, like, damn, like, it sucks to just not even feel like I can pray because I just don't believe that it does shit. And I'm too jaded about it all. Yeah. And I almost saw in Sister Paxton something that I think I crave almost, that I miss. And I interpreted that final moment where he crawls over to her. He kind of lays on her for a second before he tries to kill her. Yeah. And I almost saw that as this evil, terrible man in his last moments wanted to be near, like, a belief in a sense. I don't know.
End it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I felt a little bit that too, where I think that's why I'm projecting some of my trauma too, where I'm like, I wanted her to go ballistic. Yeah. I wanted her to wreak havoc. I wanted, like, just, I wanted her to like kind of just really lean into the violence, everything that she's been like told she can't, be bigger. And so I think when she was like praying, I was like, oh no. And then when she went outside, this is my Mormon brain. I'm like, this looks like the Sacred Grove. Is there going to be
no,
like
Chelsea,
a first vision?
I thought she was going to reach up her hand and it was just going to end.
I'm like, please no, God, please don't come. And so when the butterfly landed on her arm, I was like, okay, that's better. But I still I can still feel the wounds inside of me. Just like, I don't know. I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
And I'm angry. I'm still like so angry about it.
Oh, that's interesting. Because I can see what you're saying. Like, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like the nuance of that ending is what is so maddening. Because it's like, it's not nuanced to control people. It's not nuanced to. Yeah. Is that it?
Kind of, yeah. I think I felt so angry and watching this and some like the garment talk and stuff and things that you like feel in your body.
Yeah.
You're like, and I was seeing red for years. I remember at one point after like I left the church, made the decision, I was in my bed and I just like was so felt like Heat Miser from the Christmas cartoon. But Nick like looked at me, he's like, I don't even recognize you. I think it's just these layers that you just cover up and you hide, and now they're just like oozing out of the wound, and it just like kept going for me. Like I was so beyond shocked with how angry I was. It just kept going and flowing, and so I'm like, what he put them through obviously was horrific, and so I just wanted to see her just like completely lash out. And I think that was a projection on my point, but I do feel like the softening of like finding beauty, which is what I'm really trying to lean into, and I haven't quite gotten there.
No, and I can relate too. I can absolutely relate also, especially in the sense of actually in the first beginning part of the movie, we paused it because I was watching this from home. I was just with a handful of friends and we paused it. I went to the bathroom and I came back and I was like, am I Mr. Reed? Like I was actually feeling, no, I'm serious. Like really? I was like feeling really out of sorts because I was like, I don't want to be, and that's my own insecurities tied up with what I do, podcasting about this, whatever. But I'm like, I don't want, it's just so complicated, I guess, is like what it was reminding me of like, for me, it feels so absolutely clear as day. And don't get me wrong, there are so many parts about it that are clear as day. I'm not trying to introduce like, but maybe no, like fuck that. But the kernel of belief, I guess it caused me to reflect more on like, regardless of, even though now I'm agnostic, there's still something inside of me that like, I wouldn't even call it belief, but that is searching for, searching beyond, right? And like, I think that's why it was so triggering too, is like the dungeon part with the prophet, it was like this obsession of Mr. Reed's of finding out like what does actually happen after death, and the only way to know is through. The only way to know is to die. And like how scary that is when you have such a belief your whole life that you know exactly what's going to happen after you die. And this is so, again, like despite its faults, because I don't think it was a perfect movie by any means, I love movies that you bring your own experience to and it shapes and colors the narrative in such significant ways. Because my big thing right now is death. My dad died earlier this year. My grandma just died. And so to me, it was the death part of it all that was like so panic inducing to watch someone so obsessed with death that they were like, and also because that's what religion is, right? Ultimately, it's kind of an obsession of what's the meaning of life and what happens after we die. So the death part of it was what like really stuck out to me. And I think that eclipsed in my watching of it, like my Mormon specific rage. So it's just really interesting to think about, bringing that, my frame of mind to it, I think made me less noticeable specifically of what you're saying, but as you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, like to have just seen her like go ballistic would have been very, very gratifying.
I think it would have been like soothing or just, I don't know, validating. But at the same time, like the whole thing with the butterflies, that's something that's in my family. My grandpa passed away, and butterflies are like a symbol of him. And just earlier this summer, like, and I feel very similar to you, and just like spiritually skeptical of just about anything. I feel like I just need to stay put, of just like Brett Hartley's nihilism of just the sacred is in the dirty diapers.
Yes.
Everyday thing. That's kind of where I'm living
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
But like there was a moment where it was like a sister trip and we were all together out in nature listening to music, and there was a butterfly that came and I got really emotional, and I'm like, I don't believe this is my grandpa, but like it's making me think of him, which is like the most beautiful part of having a symbol is remembering things that bring you peace and love and like this grief. And so seeing that butterfly, I'm like, I do think as I'm sitting with it, it's like I think that there's really beautiful aspects to like not villainizing and terrorizing just religion as a concept. It's like finding the symbols in your life that bring you peace, that don't do harm to other people. And that butterfly was like a perfect example.
Yeah. And something sweet about the butterfly was Sister Paxton, because at the very end, she like kind of envisions a butterfly on her hand.
Yeah.
But at the very beginning, when they're talking in the living room, Sister Barnes mentions that her dad has died.
Yeah.
And Sister Paxton says, when I die, I want to come back as a butterfly and I'll fly onto people's finger so they'll know for sure it's me, which is also really sweet because that's not Mormon at all.
No,
like
it's
that's not a Mormon
Yeah.
thing. And so I think that also kind of showed her complexity of her belief system, though she appeared so typically Mormon, that she had maybe more complexity around all of that than you would originally give her credit
like
for.
she reserved some parts for herself that she created.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
which
she
is
allowed
beautiful.
herself like ownership of almost. But yeah, I think that there was, I have thought of so many alternate endings. I'm curious if you thought of any. I actually wanted the prophet, the woman, to just be his wife and not be a creepy, like, I just wanted it to like, oh, wait, he actually has a wife. And maybe I was expecting, because they actually say like Mrs. Reed, because and the
I thought
blueberry
so
pie
too,
was connected
yeah.
with the wife, but I kind of wanted her to be like him, like equally like cheery, kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And then maybe it was something like she was under the certain influence. There was so many paths it could have taken. I do think that I'm also with you that the ending I think was really, there's so much that could be said about it. It didn't quite satisfy me in the way that the beginning set me up to be satisfied. I do think for sure. Yeah. I also think all of the women in the cages was also just like logistically confusing, which I understand you need to suspend disbelief when watching a horror genre film.
Yeah.
But it felt like, are we supposed to assume that these women went through this whole experiment as well?
That's what I assumed.
That's what my friend said too. And she was like, oh yeah, I think for sure. But for some reason, I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like, what are the chances that many women, I guess maybe just because Sister Barnes was there differently, but like, I just can't imagine that situation playing out that cleanly, that way, that many times almost. This is how my brain works. I'm like, realistically speaking, this many women could not go missing in the same area.
I don't know how many there were. It looked like 10.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can see that. Like, I can see,
That could have happened.
Yeah.
And I think his ultimate goal then with...
Like, I think we're always assuming the best out of people. And like, especially if you get 2 young sister missionaries, if he did that like 3 or 4 times, like... I mean, I wouldn't be prepared to try to kill somebody an hour after meeting them, like, and yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that that was his ultimate ends with Sister Paxton, right? And so that's why I think there was a certain amount of indication of like, at least she didn't, and she did fight back a bit.
Yeah, she did.
But then in her moment of surrender, I do think it's so beautiful, to your point, that like, Sister Barnes came through was like, nah, not
that
this.
was the highlight for sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if there was any other...
I know, we've kind of gone on a ramble.
No, I loved it. That's exactly what I was hoping this would be. I'm just seeing if there's any other discussion points. Oh, okay, maybe this is my final little take on the whole complicatedness of it all. There was a moment at the beginning in the living room when he introduces the concept of polygamy. They're seeming out of sorts. And I don't remember what prompts it, but Sister Paxton says, we know it's true because of how it makes us feel. And I've been sitting with that a lot because I think it is the most terrifying thing about religion. And it's also one of the most potentially beautiful things, not about religion per se, but about people finding belief and spirituality. And I'm thinking now of a Kurt Vonnegut quote where he says something like, I used to think like unwavering faith was this really beautiful thing, and now I find it like the most terrifying thing because it's of what that can lead to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think as someone who was Mormon, we know that we believed something because of how it made us feel. And so much of what's terrifying about deconstructing is like, I believed this because I felt like this was true. At least for me. Maybe you have a different experience, but I didn't believe the church was true because I knew shit about history. I read the Book of Mormon and I prayed if it was true, and I felt like it was true. And I saw myself so much in Sister Paxton, but then just this very delicate balance of, especially as I think we relate on where we've landed, of I believed something based on feelings that were manipulated. Mm-hmm. And now how do I learn to trust myself and my feelings here on the other side of it? Because how you feel can be such a wonderful gauge, a guided intuition, but it also can be, when it's being used against you and it's being manipulated, your feelings, it can be the most frightening thing in the world. And I feel like when that paid off in the movie, it was when she was praying, and her kind of point was like, I'm not praying because I think God's going to come down and save me. I'm praying because like that makes me feel better right now.
Yeah.
And that to me felt kind of beautiful. But then the way she said she believes in the Mormon church at the beginning, even with the porn thing, she's like, well, I saw this woman having porn and I just knew God was real because like she seemed like she, you know, was not happy being a porn star. And I think that's a really complicated thing that I'm still sitting with and making sense of, but I'm curious what comes up for you around that.
Yeah, no, I think Mormonism has manipulated that concept of feeling, because I feel like it's hard to describe to someone who wasn't raised Mormon, but the severity that we've equated discomfort with the devil is a really, really big hindrance to being curious, to asking questions. And so questioning something that could disrupt the entire foundation that all of your life's decisions were made on is going to be uncomfortable. And a lot of members will take that as like, oh, that means this is not from God. That means this can't be true. That means Satan must be here. And so really having to like disconnect, like after your feelings have been manipulated, like you talked about so severely, it's really hard to trust yourself. And so I think that's a really big hindrance to like even just getting out, is just like, you have to go through it. It has to be uncomfortable. But we've been programmed to believe that means it's not of God. And that is such a huge hill to climb. I'm right there with you, like trying to trust my feelings. And I have this, it's embarrassing, but like, you know, one of my biggest insecurities is like, I'm dumb. Like, I just can't trust my own thoughts because they've been manipulated so much. And I'm like, I believed this for so long. And I really, really believed Bob Ross. Like, I really believed that.
100%.
And it ended up not being true. And so I'm just trying to like move through the world a little bit more cautiously. But yeah, I do think it is essential to find things that can be self-soothing to you. And I think if prayer is something, like, I will notice like when I'm really, really, really terrified, I will habitually resort to like a prayer in my head.
No, it like Dear Heavenly Father pops into my brain.
Immediately.
And I'm like, no.
It's just like leaning on these comfort neutralizers.
Familiarity too.
Yeah. So I think it's just like trying to find things that bring you peace, but also like learning how to trust yourself and your autonomy, which is a really hard skill. And these sister missionaries were put through the ringer trying to do that in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. In very, very dire circumstances.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay, the last thing I'll say that I think is interesting as you were saying that is how Hugh Grant, at the beginning, to your point, like he's the male, there's the power dynamic. He's like trapped these sisters in his house, but he could almost be viewed as he's at least trying to tell them the truth. Like he's at least trying to expose to them, like, you know, you're obviously not in those circumstances, but like, I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking about how interesting that
such an
role
ex-Mormon
was.
thing to humanize the villain, to humanize Satan, which we all like comes full circle around like, well, yeah, Satan's not so bad.
No,
Anyway,
honestly, I saw an alternate ending to this movie where, and I mean, this is not like the hottest take ever. It's like a horror movie. I could see an alternate ending where he was a Satanist, but you know what I actually thought of? This is such a deep cut. I thought about how Mormon Satan is a really interesting figure because Mormon Satan didn't get a body and is Satan because Mormon Satan wanted everyone to come to earth and not have any free agency. so that they would all go back to heaven, which in a lot of ways is a much more compassionate plan than a God who says, let's send everyone down to earth. They'll forget everything. Let's see what they do. Yeah. And if they happen
and it's not a fair fight. Yep. Not everyone's starting on the same.
Not at all. But let's see what they do and see if they make it back. And I was thinking it could be a fascinating twist, way too deep of a Mormon cut. But if Hugh Grant was a Satanist, but like of the Mormon Satan, because ultimately the Mormon Satan, the worst offense of Mormon Satan is control. He wanted to, which also is ironic.
I like
compared to God. Anyway, there was like so much there that I was like, oh, I thought.
I'm liking where this is going.
Thanks.
Sequel.
A24.
Heretic sequel.
Let's do it. Hit me up. No, I found, yes, I so appreciate this. Thank you for talking through all of it. And I'm super excited for you to watch it again. Maybe you'll watch it a third time. I'm taking a break for a long time. I bought tickets to go to the Lost and Found event, and I was like, I need a break.
4 times in like a 2-week period is a lot.
It was a little much. Although I am really excited. I know people are starting to see it now. I'm really excited. Like even just the difference between you and I, we've had obviously unique journeys, but also very similar. Like grew up in a similar place, did a Mormon faith deconstruction, and to have obviously similar in some ways, but also very different takeaways, I think is a really interesting thing. So I can't wait to see what other people think of it. And I don't know. I always just think with these Mormon media moments, I felt this way when I went and saw Book of Mormon, the musical. It's just weird to be like, we actually lived this though. Like this, not that as in the movie, but to have more and more people kind of exposed to some of this stuff is really in one way validating and in another way triggering, because people are already like, wait, could that have happened on a mission? I would have walked right in that door, Chelsea. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought twice. Like I thought that when they first walked in the door, it was going to be like, oh, these naive missionaries, they should have known. If someone on my mission seemed interested in the church and was a friendly, polite guy with a British accent nonetheless.
Hugh Grant?
Seriously, if it was Hugh Grant and said, oh, my wife's in here, walk on in, I would have just walked in the door. Yeah. Like that. And we didn't dwell on that because the movie doesn't. But as far as the accuracy of that, completely accurate. And even just people realizing how unsafe a mission is interesting to witness.
How vulnerable you are. Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, for your time. I love chatting with you. I love that we got to do this on mics because I didn't get to hear any of your reactions. So this was super fun to swap reactions. And I will make sure to link all the things related to Chelsea so you know where to find her on Instagram, on TikTok. I'll link Lost and Found and everything. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
GIRLSCAMP, it's Girlscamp. This has been a 58 Ember production. For more shows, please visit the 58 Ember channel, 58ember.com, or find us at 58 Ember Media on socials.